Alright guys, welcome back to WGNC Garage. Today we're going to be installing the fuel pressure gauge from Defi on my car. Now I already have a turbo gauge and the Advance SE already installed in the vehicle. So this contraption which you see here is attached to the original Defi sensor. I did have to order these parts from Nampa. Specifically in the PT threading, which is 1/8. It is different than the NPT threading that we have here. So I had to custom order this bracket and the little pieces to go with it so that I can install it onto the Stagea and have it function with the Defi system. So let's get started. Alright, so we got the hood open. We're going to be using fuel injector hose clamps, not the little standard kind of clamps that you see everywhere, just because there is supposed to be high pressure in the system. So as you can see, it's kind of an L shape, and I kind of have it orientated how it's more or less going to be here. I'm going to cut the fuel line and place one end on here and the other on here. Now I'm placing this after the fuel filter. Personal choice, reason being, if any debris goes in through here and it makes it into the sensor, I don't want it to stop reading or give me a false reading. So I'd rather put it after the filter where there shouldn't be any debris, and if there's a false reading or something is actually incorrect, I can hopefully narrow down to just being the sensor being the issue and not actual debris inside. Other than that, the kit does provide a connection for this, which I'll be running along the back. I do feed mine in through the side fender. Eventually I will be rerouting those once I find a good spot through the firewall where I can put a nice rubber grommet and have it seal the elements, that way they don't go into the vehicle. So for right now, I feed it in through the front fender. There's a small hole on the side that I do use for that. And then I already have an Advance SE system. I'll show how that's installed in a different video, as I'll be doing that on a Supra. So now that we have this here, let's get started. Alright, so I kind of placed a rag here to hopefully help with the fuel that's going to spill out inevitably from the system. This line, as you can see, is pretty worn to the fuel damper. The fuel pressure regulator's here, the fuel dampener is there, that's on the return. I will be swapping out this line for new 3/8 line, so that I'll be heading to the auto parts store and I'll show you guys how to do that. The car has been off for about 3 days now. I wanted to lower the pressure as much as possible. So now once I do this, I'm going to, which I've already started splitting, I'm going to quickly assemble this together so that the least amount of fuel is leaked out. I don't want fuel leaking out next to electronics. So where's the other? Okay, fuel clamps there. just accept it. Alright, so the sensor has been placed in. Jesus, that's soaked in fuel. That's going to be tossed out. And let's clean up that. Alright, now that that's installed, I'm going to place these clamps here and tighten them down. I don't know if this line just made my hands stained because it's not actually fuel rated, but I'll do some research and try to figure out if that's a normal occurrence to happen on what's supposed to be fuel rated line, or if this is something that's not supposed to happen. I don't think fuel line is supposed to do that. So if this is not fuel line, I will be changing it to proper fuel line. Alright, so there we go. So I'm also going to take advantage, had a shop do some small maintenance on my vehicle. As you can see, that back line is silicone. I did not have the time, so I bought a kit and they replaced it. In the process, they ripped out my Defi gauge for my boost, which is supposed to be here on top of another bracket that was supposed to be holding my brake line, so which they didn't do, and they lost it. So for now, I'm going to take this and see if I can somehow attach it back over there, but they also lost the one here, which I'm not happy about, but it does make this line shorter, which will increase the responsiveness of my boost gauge. So yeah, they mauled that. So I will be doing that. So I tried kind of prying at it and it looked like the bracket was going to break. So what I'm doing is I'm using my razor blade. I'm just cutting off the legs very gently without damaging the actual centerpiece or the bracket. I'm just kind of holding it in place, wiggling. There's another one, and the final one. Alright, so now that that's off, hopefully, yep, there we go. Alright, so now this will be repositioned. So I just need a clip that can hold this here. Honestly, I'm probably going to end up using a zip tie. Run this line there. And then what I'll do is I'll zip tie this line up out of the way, so that way it does not get damaged. And then I will shorten this vacuum line to here and place that back in place. Alright, so I was able to zip tie this into place, so it barely moves. Now I'm going to cut this down to size here. Where'd my razor blade go? The mechanic's life. Where'd oh, here it is. Alright, so I want to have some extra just in case anything was to go wrong. Alright, so I will save this extra line. This will go on here. And then I will be placing a zip tie around it to help hold it into place. And there we go. Alright, now to get some snips to cut off the excess. Alright, so I'm going to cut off these excess pieces. There we go. Nope. Not gonna be that guy that cuts these at an angle. Alright, that one's straight. And that one's straight. Alright, so now that that's there, I do want to hold this up. However, I want to run it with the new sensor wire. So let's undo this real quick. Alright. I'm kind of concerned if this is going to be enough to reach the inside. Alright, let me just pass it under and plug in the sensor. Okay. Probably hold that there away from any heat source. Alright. Hopefully this is enough to reach the sensor system inside. Should be enough. So, like I said, I kind of feed it in through the seals. So, bear with me. Alright, there we go. Alright, I was able to feed it through, kind of just wiggled my hands until I could grab it and pass through. Alright, now I do pull this up with my finger and slide it behind the weather stripping. See, it's going. There we go. All right. Now, I don't want to pull too much on the connector, because I don't want it getting all sorts of messed up. Now, run it in through here. Now, the interesting thing for mine is that, pardon all the garbage and debris, but I do have my Defi gauge system hidden in my glove box. So now I gotta feed this behind the glove box, and this is fuel pressure, so fuel pressure gauge connects here as stated by the system. Fuel pressure, and boom. Alright, so my lines are now tucked as best as they can for now, until I eventually find a position to bring it through the firewall. So my road flare, lock key, tire pressure. Alright, so now the rest will be in here, as everything else is ready for it to be installed. So, take a few zip ties. Okay, let's see if I can run this behind this booster vacuum line. Oh, what the heck happened here? What? No. Okay. Let's be cautious with this. Okay, that clipped back in. That was a kind of worrisome moment there for me. Thought I broke the connector. There we go. So sensor is here, fuel lines are there. This has a protective. So I'm going to loosely zip tie this to here. This will go here. So another zip tie here. Alright, let's get two more should be good enough. So we'll get these two together right around here. Okay, and this one, let's see if we can get them together right here. Yeah, that's good. Now, right here. Alright, so there we go. Now I can tighten them down, make sure the cable doesn't go anywhere. So this one right here. And this one right there, there, and there. Maybe this one there. Alright. Excess. Cool. Now we'll cut off the excess on these. There we go. Alright, so everything's been put in place. All this other stuff can now be put away. So I'm going to clean up the engine bay and I'll continue with the installation. So cleaned everything up, got everything ready. Time to move inside. Don't crush my phone. Alright, there we go. Now on the interior of my Stagea, there's already a boost gauge, and the cable that they give us is very short. I did order what they call a 2-meter cable. That's the one I will be using to eventually put the rest of the gauges across here, including this fuel pressure gauge. For now, I'm going to mount them side by side using the small cable that is provided. However, being that the back of these is disconnect and connect, I am going to remove this one from here after I mount this pod and move the turbo gauge closer forward and leave the fuel pressure gauge over here. So I'm going to mount, where's the mount? Here it is. Alright, so I'm going to start getting all this ready. Also, these pods, as you can see, just drop right in, drop right out. So in order for them to actually be held into place, they use this little foam that you stick on around it as such, and then it kind of helps pressure fit it into place and make sure that it sits in there snugly. So let's get this and place this on the fuel gauge. I do mine slightly back from the edge. And again, doesn't really matter where you start or stop, as long as it is on the gauge, you will be good. I try to get it as straight line as possible, and there we go. So that is what it should look like. A little bit sideways there, but we're good. So now the actual base is this piece with this bottom piece to connect. Now it does have a very small, which I will place inside here, screw a small, very small washer and one very small nut. Now, for the actual bracket, it's straight through basically. However, on the actual pod, you'll notice one is clear. Well, not clear, but a clean circle, and the other one has a pattern for a bolt. That is where this nut will sit. And as long as your finger is over this outer half, you can send this through and tighten it with the small Allen. So I will place that there. Now with this, I will attempt to do my best to make sure it will stick. So I'm putting one on the front and one on the back. Now before I stick this onto the vehicle, I'm going to clean up the dash with a wee bit of alcohol to make sure that it actually sticks okay and doesn't suddenly come flying off at me or just falls while I'm not there. Okay. Now, if you do this on a vehicle and obviously the color of the dash starts coming off, don't continue doing that. So just be wary of that. Now that that's been cleaned, I will let that dry a moment. However, I am going to be placing this pod slightly more forward so that I can put an Allen through there. So that should be good. As you can see, there's also cuts in it that allow the fingers to bend to help adjust to an uneven surface. So you can see this one kind of bent down with the glue while the rest stayed. So it won't surprise me if this one kind of does the same. Yep, see? There we go. Kind of contoured itself to the dash. All right. Now, I will get this and the little lock style in there. And then place this. Oh, there we go. There. Have it pass through. And I will now place the nut here. So, alright, so now that I've got it kind of placed, I'm going to use a little Allen key and gently thread this in till where there's a little bit of resistance. Alright, this Allen key size is size 3. So it's a, 3mm. Not sure if you're going to see that on the video, but it is a 3. Alright, now that that's done and this has dried, I'm going to peel the covers and attempt to stick this here slightly more forward of the other one. Alright, so we'll let that set. Now with this one, I do leave them loose enough to where I can move them. Again, it does have this foam around it, so kind of have to shake it free. It's been in here for a while, so let me see. I don't want to break the plastic, so just to be on the safe side, I'm going to unscrew this from here. Still can't get it by hand. All right. So there we go. And I want to catch the little nut. All right, so I'm gonna place that in the center console of my Stagea. And now I'm going to slowly try to wiggle this piece out. It's very interesting how tight this is now after being in there for a while. If I can't get this out, doesn't seem like I really can. Alright, so since I can't really get this one out, I'm going to swap their positions. So let me unbolt this one from here, and let's move the gauge to the position over here. Alright, so I was able to move or unscrew that pod gauge. So now let's grab the bolt. This is the nut and the washer. So now I will mount this pod further up, and actually right before I do that, just to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to take the cable that they provided and connect it to my turbo pod gauge. This is the feed wire for the secondary. So now that will go here, and we will feed this in and through, line this up, and use my 3mm wrench, Allen key, I should say, to tighten this down. So now that this has been mounted, my turbo gauge is still the primary front. I will now attempt to place this pod in, and, or actually, before I do that, let me see if I can get this aligned correctly. So more or less there, and fuel pressure. There we go. All right, so there we go. My pressure gauge is there. So now the input should be this one, like it was on my turbo gauge. So we'll place that there. All right. Now, to make sure everything is working, I will get my keys. All right, so I got my keys. Let's see if the gauges work correctly. Zero. That might be from the air in the line. Let's let them shut off. Let's turn the key on one more time. I did hear a relay click, so I'm wondering if there's that weak. pressure gauge is working. The turbo gauge is also working as correct. So now we can install this. Actually, I might need, just because of the position, I might need to drop this in first. Yeah. Oh, come on. There we go. Alright. There we go. Now we got that more or less lined up. There we go. And the 3mm. So all right, there we go. So as we can see, everything is working correctly. I've tightened everything down. So now the fuel pressure gauge is installed.